and welcome to Cover Story. Well, the presidential elections are around the corner and it does seem that we shall soon have a new incumbent at Rashtrapati Bhavan. Technically, of course, President Ramnath Kovind can get a second term. There's also been no real controversy around his tenure. But we are told that the BJP, which has the numbers along with the NDA, is keen to see a fresh incumbent at Rashtrapati Bhavan. So this week in Cover Story, we are going to be taking a look at all the buzz that is going around and also taking a look back at some of the past precedents between Prime Ministers and Presidents.
Do swear in the name of God, that I will faithfully execute the office of President of India and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect and defend the Constitution and the law, and that I will devote myself to the service and well-being of the people of India.
As President Ramnath Kovind's term comes to an end, the hunt is on for his replacement both within the government and the opposition. The office of the President is the highest constitutional office, and while it is not the most powerful, it does have the potential to take on the Prime Minister of the day, as is what happened with Dr. Rajendra Prasad and Nehru, Gyani Zail Singh and Rajiv Gandhi. When it comes to rubber stamp presidents, however, then Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed comes to mind. But for most, Prime Ministers like Rashtrapati Bhavan to be occupied by like-minded individuals who will not contradict or embarrass their points of views. That is why Sonia Gandhi opted for Pratibha Patil over the claims of veteran Congress leader Pranab Mukherjee, and Narendra Modi preferred Kovind over someone like Sushma Swaraj. If there is one thing that the Modi government has taught us, it is this: there is no point in speculating, because whoever the candidate for the president or the vice president is going to be, he or she is going to be a surprise. But then again, where is the fun in that? So let's take a look at some of the names that are doing the rounds in the rumour mills. Well, speculation has it that the Prime Minister Modi is very keen to see a lady president in Rashtrapati Bhavan, and accordingly two lady governors' names have been shortlisted. These are Tamilisai Soundarajan and Draupadi Murmu. There is also a speculation that he would like to see a tribal occupying Rashtrapati Bhavan. A tribal leader, well, the name of Girish Chandra Murmu, the former Lieutenant Governor of J&K and the current CAG, his name has been shortlisted, as well as the perennial favourite, the Governor of Kerala, Arif Mohammed Khan. Then again, there is one more criteria, that whoever the candidate should be, he or she must have the Sangh's backing, which means they must come from the RSS background. Well, enough of speculation. Now, instead of speculating, let's take a look at some of the past occasions between the past presidents and Prime Ministers of India. Before he appointed Ramnath Kovind in 2017, Prime Minister Modi came into office at a time when the UPA nominee Pranab Mukherjee was in office. A veteran Congress leader, Pranab Mukherjee, however, had friends across the aisle and soon developed a working relationship with both Narendra Modi and even the RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat. PM Modi is on record to say that he enjoyed his visits to Rashtrapati Bhavan as he learnt a lot from the senior leader. However, Mukherjee may have kept him guessing with his comments, such as the one when he referred to Indira Gandhi as India's most acceptable PM.
One of the remarkable personalities of the 20th century all over the world. And to the people of India, even today, after her passing away in 1984, 31st October, she is the most acceptable ruler, Prime Minister of a democratic country, even today.
हम लोग भाग्यवान हैं कि हमारे राष्ट्रपति जी स्वयं में अपने आप में एक चलती फिरती यूनिवर्सिटी है। कोई मुझे पूछे कि प्रधानमंत्री बनने का आपका सबसे बड़ा फायदा क्या है, तो मैं कहूंगा सबसे बड़ा मेरा फायदा है राष्ट्रपति जी के निकट जाने का। जब मैं मिलता हूं, ज्ञान का भंडार होता है। मैं सच बताता हूं जी, इतनी चीजें बारीकी से बताते हो, उसके साथ उनका एक्सपीरियंस होता है।
Well, they did have their differences. One of them being when the Modi government advocated governor's rule in Uttarakhand, dismissing the then Harish Rawat government. Pranab voiced his apprehensions but agreed. Later on, the Nainital High Court struck down the decision on governor's rule. Another difference was when President Mukherjee voiced his concerns over the threat to freedom of speech during the Modi government.
The media's other responsibilities have increased. It must be the watchdog, the gatekeeper, and the mediator between the leaders and the public. Friends, it must raise and create awareness about issues concerning public welfare, hold public or private institutions and their representatives accountable for all their actions or indeed their inaction.
They called him the people's president for a reason. India's missile man was no politician, yet APJ Abdul Kalam's blunt, no-nonsense approach gave him a certain political edge as he occupied Rashtrapati Bhavan with both grace and dignity. He was president from 2002 to 2007, sworn in during an NDA government with Atal Bihari Vajpayee as Prime Minister, and stayed on to swear in a Congress government in 2004.
He was almost an accidental president. The BJP's choice for the job was PC Alexander. When the Congress vetoed it after promises had been made to Dr. Alexander, Brijesh Mishra and Natwar Singh of the Congress met and came up with a compromise candidate in the form of the then Vice President Krishan Kant. When the RSS vetoed that, they had to hurriedly find a replacement, and Kalam's name was suggested by Chandrababu Naidu, and he was strongly supported by Amar Singh and Mulayam Singh Yadav, who he had known when Mulayam was Defence Minister.
In his autobiography, Turning Points, late President Abdul Kalam writes about a hot summer evening in June 2002 when he got a call from then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. At that time, President Kalam was teaching at the Anna University in Chennai, and when he returned to his rooms from class in the evening, he was told that someone had been trying to reach him all day. On the other side of the line was Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
President Kalam was very unconventional, and when he actually won election against Lakshmi Sahgal, so Pramod Mahajan, who was his election agent, went to him and said that, sir, what is the auspicious date on which you would like to conduct swearing in? So President Kalam said, look, I'm a man of science. I know physics. As far as I know, the sun moves on its axis, Earth rotates, and Moon has its thing. So all days are same. They are not. They don't have any significance or insignificance. All days are same.
His time in office had its share of political flashpoints. For instance, Abdul Kalam did not approve of the decision to impose governor's rule in Bihar in 2005, and later revealed in his memoirs that he had even contemplated resigning at the time. He also sent by UPA's Office of Profit Bill for reconsideration when he realized it was only designed to protect MPs such as Sonia Gandhi, who was then both NAC chairperson and a MP. As a result, she had to resign both posts and contest a by-election.
He turned out to be a politician among politicians. I can give you several examples. For instance, when he took over as president, he immediately wanted to visit Gujarat. That was the time Riot had taken place and Godhra and all that. And Vajpayee, Prime Minister Vajpayee was quite apprehensive, and Vajpayee ji said, please don't go. The Home Ministry officials told him that, you will be boycotted, there will be cold reception and all. But Kalam was very sure-footed. He said, no, I will go, and he went. And then the entire Prime Minister Modi, he was that time Chief Minister of Gujarat, he was present with his cabinet, took him around. They actually, Modi and President Kalam that time got along very well.
Actually, it's a little known story, but the only time there was a conflict between Kalam and the Vajpayee government was when elections were announced. Kalam said to Vajpayee that during this period, do you think it's right for you to continue in office? Perhaps we should have some kind of caretaker regime. And Vajpayee said, no, this is how it's always been. This is what the Constitution says. And Arun Jaitley was sent to Kalam to explain the constitutional position, because Arun Jaitley, of course, he is one of our leading constitutional lawyers, was a member of that cabinet. He may even have been law minister for all I remember. So after that, Kalam, I think, saw the point and a conflict was averted. Other than that, Kalam was not the sort of chap who objected too much.
But the political hot potato was really what happened in 2004. For if you recall, after the elections, the Congress became the single largest party, and conventional wisdom had Sonia Gandhi staking her claim for the top job. She did visit then President Abdul Kalam to stake the Congress claim, but also told him that it was not her but Manmohan Singh who would be the UP's Prime Minister candidate. According to BJP leader Subramaniam Swamy, it was President Kalam who cautioned her against taking claim as Prime Minister on the grounds that she was a foreigner. However, in his memoir, Kalam doesn't seem to support this theory, simply saying that the Rashtrapati Bhavan Secretariat had to rework the letter appointing Dr. Singh as the Prime Minister and invited him to form the government.
She was to meet him at 5 o'clock to stake her claim. 17th May 2004. At a little before 5 o'clock, Manmohan Singh reads out a letter which came from the Rashtrapati Bhavan at 3:30, superseding the letter he had written the previous day, inviting her to form the government. 340 letters were given by Sonia Gandhi's office to the President, staking her claim, each individually written, including a letter from Ms. Sonia Gandhi herself. I, Sonia Gandhi, member of Parliament elected from Raebareli, hereby propose Ms. Sonia Gandhi for Prime Ministership. How can she say that I didn't want to?
It's very hard to know what happens between the leader of a party and the President of India because those conversations are privileged and confidential. But there is, as far as I can see, no evidence that Dr. Kalam ever objected to Sonia Gandhi becoming Prime Minister, nor is it clear on what grounds he could have done so even if he'd wished. I mean, she'd been elected to Parliament, she was the leader of a coalition which had a majority, so how could he, even if he'd wanted to refuse it, how could he have refused her? Moreover, Dr. Kalam himself has always dismissed the story, and to set the rumours straight, in his autobiography he narrated a series of events which makes it clear that it wasn't ever true that she asked him for the job and he said no. So ultimately we have to decide, if you want to believe that Dr. Kalam stopped Sonia Gandhi from becoming Prime Minister, then you have also got to believe that Dr. Kalam is a liar. Because when he was asked about this, he's denied it. In his autobiography, he's denied it. So why would he deny it?
There were others too who left their own presidential mark at Rashtrapati Bhavan, starting from our first president Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who, if the rumours are right, did not get along too well with our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. They differed on the oldest of political issues, a turf war for greater power. Letters between the two revealed that the former sought to widen the powers of the president. However, Nehru countered him by pointing out that the framers of the constitution had clearly opted for the parliamentary form of government as opposed to the presidential form. The two also fought over Nehru's pet Hindu Code Bill.
Prasad made it very clear that he would not assent to the Hindu Code Bill even if it was passed. And when the matter came up before Parliament, during the Provisional Parliament, 13 members spoke and not one of them spoke in favor of Jawaharlal Nehru.
In the early days of our republic, roles had not been etched out. Remember that all of these people were freedom fighters together. Gandhiji was the towering figure, and the rest there were some differences, but they saw themselves broadly as equals. Now suddenly you have a structure in place, and the president has one role, the prime minister has one role. It took them time to get adjusted to these new roles, and I think some kind of conflict therefore was almost inevitable in that situation.
There was correspondence between the two. It started with Rajendra Prasad delivering a lecture at the Indian Law Institute, where he asserted that the constitution does not anywhere say that the president will be bound by the advice of Council of Ministers. The constitution, as we know, even now says that all executive power of the union shall be vested in the president and shall be exercised by him either directly or through officers subordinate to him. Even now that is the position. But by an amendment subsequently, as you know, it was added that he shall act in accordance with that advice. During Rajendra Prasad time, that amendment had not been made, and he made that point.
The differences between Nehru and Prasad were more academic than political and never really degenerated to a public bickering spat.
I think Nehru and Rajendra Prasad had very bad relations. There were the relations of equals. It is said that Nehru actually wanted Rajgopalachari to be the President of India, and Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Rajendra Babu as we call him, he was a man of very strong likes and dislikes. He was a slightly right wing. They had very famous differences over Hindu Code Bill. Nehru was actually a kind of a very towering figure. He wanted to have he actually worked out, how flag is to be respected, what should be the dress code in government employees, and how the president should conduct himself when he goes abroad. When Nehru was abroad, he didn't even know. So President Rajendra Prasad took a decision and got the cabinet approval to grant Bharat Ratna to Nehru.
Unfortunately, there were some presidents who were not so feisty and ended up becoming a rubber stamp to the Prime Minister of the time. The foremost that comes to mind, of course, is Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, who signed Indira Gandhi's controversial emergency proclamation at midnight.
Mr. Siddharth Shankar Ray went to see Mr. Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, convinced Mrs. Gandhi, showed her the constitution that emergency can be declared. When she went to Rashtrapati Bhavan to meet the President, Mr. Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, I was there, but I was of course in the second room. Yeah. But at the last minute, I was called in and told that Navan will bring the ordinance, draft ordinance for you to sign. And about the ordinance was drafted by Mr. Siddharth Shankar Ray, and it was Brahmananda Reddy was the Home Minister. He was briefed about it. And Mrs. Gandhi raised the question whether they should be discussed in the cabinet meeting or not. Even Siddharth Shankar Ray went to the extent of suggesting that cabinet consists of Prime Minister and even one minister.
So it was pretty much a minister ordering a Babu to do something, except in this case there were two Babus, Dhawan and Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, and Mrs. Gandhi was the minister. I personally believe that as President of India, if something so unthinkable to our democracy was going to happen, the least you could have done was, I'm sending this back, I will not sign it, I want the cabinet to meet, I want them to come back to me, I want them to explain why they're doing it. I think it's a matter of shame for India that he didn't do that.
And then there was Gyani Zail Singh, who made the notorious comment that he was ready to sweep the floor if his leader, that is Indira Gandhi, asked him to do so. Perhaps he was so grateful that she had chosen him for the top job.
Of all the bad things that Indira Gandhi did to India, perhaps the most idiotic and cruel joke she played on the country was the choice of Gyani Zail Singh as President of India. Gyani Zail Singh was a Punjab politician who she made Home Minister. Again, people said, are you nuts? This guy can't be Home Minister. He then gave an interview in which he said, Sanjay is my Rehnuma. At that stage, Sanjay had no official position in the government. So this was pretty humiliating and embarrassing. But obviously, Mrs. Gandhi liked this kind of chamchagiri because she chose this guy to be President of India. And having been made President of India, he gave an interview in which he was asked, how do you feel about being President? And he said, in the manner of a loyal sweeper, which is what he called himself, all I care is what my leader wants. She wants me to be President, I'll be President. If she had wanted me to pick up a broom and sweep the floor, I would have swept the floor. Now, if you can imagine just the stupidity of that statement and the sheer creepiness and the sycophancy of it, you have some idea of what Zail Singh's presidency was like.
Zail Singh, however, changed colour later when Indira's son Rajiv became Prime Minister. At the time, the rapport between Rashtrapati Bhavan and Racecourse Road hit an all-time low. The Prime Minister's men even accused the President of plotting to oust Rajiv. Perhaps it was the anti-Sikh riots that followed Indira's assassination, but it was clear that Gyani did not have the same psychophone outlook towards Rajiv as he did for his mother. In fact, he even used his veto powers to scuttle Rajiv's postal amendment bill by refusing to sign it.
Indira Gandhi used to call on Zail Singh. Rajiv Gandhi stopped that practice, it seems. So there was a communication gap between the two. But then when Mrs. Gandhi died after her assassination, it was believed that Zail Singh would perhaps not administer the oath of office to Rajiv Gandhi. But it is reported that Zail Singh said, I owe it to Mrs. Gandhi and I will administer the oath of office.
Rajiv had complete contempt for Zail Singh. Zail Singh knew that Rajiv had contempt for him. It was not just normal contempt, it was also the contempt that at that stage the English-speaking middle class had for this time-serving chamcha, sycophant type figure who wanted to be a sweeper but had become president instead. And so relations were never going to be smooth. Zail Singh wanted a second term. Rajiv, who was appalled at the idea this guy was there in the first place, said no question of giving you a second term. Rajiv's choice was Shankar Anand. Zail Singh then protested and began plotting against Rajiv.
Well, don't go away because we're going to take a short break and come back and continue taking a look at the office of the President of India. Welcome back to Cover Story as we take a look at some of those who've graced India's highest office. There have been many who have made us proud, but there have also been some who made us wonder. Perhaps Sonia Gandhi learnt a lesson from her husband's turf war with Zail Singh. For when she got a chance to send a nominee to Rashtrapati Bhavan, she went in for pliable candidates. Her first choice was the trusted mentor Shivraj Patil, who had taught her parliamentary politics when she was a first-time MP. But when the left refused to support Shivraj Patil, his ardent devotion to Satya Sai Baba apparently did not go down well with the comrades. Sonia was forced to do a rethink. At the time too, current President Pranab Mukherjee was an option. He had the left support. But instead, Sonia clearly preferred the more malleable Pratibha Patil. She chose Pratibha Patil, who was so grateful at this unexpected tryst with high office that she carried her servitude to Rashtrapati Bhavan as well.
Sonia Gandhi's first preference was Shivraj Patil. Shivraj Patil had got his suits staged. In fact, there was a peacock dancing outside his house. He took it as a good omen. So he was all ready to be the next President of India. Now what happened, the left started protesting. They said that he's got right-wing leanings and he's a Sai Baba supporter and a lot of things. They expressed reservations. Then they actually became quite desperate because names were proposed and shot down, and Sonia and Manmohan in that coordination committee meeting, they were just sitting and just listening to everyone. Then it was Mr. Bardhan, A.B. Bardhan, who suggested Pratibha Patil's name. He said, I know, very good name and that will be acceptable to all UPA constituents. And Mr. Sharad Pawar seconded it.
Others like K.R. Narayanan also deserve mention, for he presided at Rashtrapati Bhavan during a rather unstable period in India's democracy, which saw 2 successive general elections in 2 years. He was in office from 1997 to 2002 and, realizing the unstable nature of the electoral verdict, set in a precedent. Until then, the practice was to invite the leader of the single largest party or a pre-election coalition to form the government. But Narayanan realized that this is not the most stable option, as is what happened with the Vajpayee government in 1996, which lasted only 13 days. So when Vajpayee once again staked claim in 1998, he asked him to furnish letters of support before inviting him.
And he did, while selecting the Prime Minister, I think he did not go very much by the constitutional position or by the conventions. And he did something which became, I think, a bad precedent of asking for letters of support and members going to him and that kind of thing. I think that is, personally I think, is a very ugly thing to do for selecting the Prime Minister.
President Narayanan was right, and this is Narayanan precedence is even now applicable in state governments and all, when there is a kind of, so it did check some kind of horse trading or so. Though some scholars feel that should not have been President's domain.
This asking for proof of support before swearing in a new Prime Minister set a precedent. It is also to President Narayanan that Sonia Gandhi made her now infamous claim of having 272 MPs in 1999. She could not follow it through, leading to another general election. That the President came out to the forecourt to receive Sonia Gandhi when she visited created its own controversy.
The wrap-up in Sonia and Narayanan is interesting, but Narayanan, as you know, was our first Dalit President. And there had always been opposition to him, he said, from the Brahmins within the Congress establishment. For instance, when he became Vice President, he was not Narasimha Rao's choice. Narasimha Rao wanted to make Dr. Alexander sort of the perpetual bridesmaid but never the bride in these matters Vice President. It didn't go through because Sonia Gandhi and the rest of the Congress objected and said, we want somebody who's a Dalit to get that position. So Narasimha Rao gave in with very bad grace and they never really got along.
And then there is the curious story of the President who could have been Prime Minister but turned down the job.
Shankar Dayal Sharma was Vice President of India when Rajiv Gandhi died. nobody knew who would succeed Rajiv Gandhi, because by then it was clear in 1991 that the Congress would form the government. Mrs. Gandhi, that's Sonia Gandhi, was advised by P.N. Huxer, who was Mrs. Indira Gandhi's old great advisor, to offer the job to Shankar Dayal Sharma. So Aruna, Asaf Ali and Natwar Singh went to Shankar Dayal Sharma, who was then Vice President of India, and said, "Sir, the party believes you should be our candidate for Prime Minister," which was as good as saying the party believes you should be Prime Minister. He turned them down. He said, "I have no interest in being Prime Minister of India." And they were gobsmacked. Nobody's ever turned down the Prime Minister of India when it's offered to them on a platter. So by the time he became President of India, he knew that no matter which Prime Minister he dealt with, this was a job he turned down.
Well, there you have it. As you can see, with the office of the President of India, much depends on the personality of the person occupying Rashtrapati Bhavan, but also on the personality of the Prime Minister of the day. If there is a strong Prime Minister in office, like Narendra Modi or even Indira Gandhi, then it would be very difficult for the President to engage in a battle of wits with the Prime Minister. We saw that with Zail Singh, in fact. He was ready to sweep the floor for Indira Gandhi, but he was equally ready to engage in a battle of wits with his son, Rajiv Gandhi. Well, as Prime Minister Modi decides as to who the next incumbent would be, that's all from us at Cover Story. Thank you so much for watching this show.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.